basically the same as it was before. It's 2.5 times your monthly payroll, except in this one, they've increased that to 3.5 times your monthly payroll if you fall into an industry code 72, which is basically any food service type business. So bars, restaurants, those sorts of things. So if you're in those industries, you can get 3.5 times your payroll as part of this request. So more support for those eligible businesses. I think to qualify here, and again, we're waiting for final clarification. This is going to be revenue based. So I believe the way that they have this right now is that you have to show a 25% reduction in quarterly revenue for quarter 1, 2, and 3 of either any one of those quarters, quarter 1 or quarter 2 or quarter 3 versus the same period in 2019. So let's say you did $500,000 in sales in the first quarter of 2019, and then in 2020 you did $250,000 in sales in that period. Well, that's a 50% decrease in that quarter. My understanding is that as long as you meet that threshold of at least 25% decrease in one of those quarters, 2020 versus 2019, then you're eligible for this program. Frankly, I think that's a fairly low threshold to make. Frankly, like a lot of businesses were physically shut down, whether you're like a bar or a restaurant or a hair salon or, dentist, those sorts of things, they were physically shut down. So I think that threshold will be fairly easy to meet. My understanding, it just has to be one quarter. So your year could have been better, but you might have had one quarter that was bad. So again, that's my understanding today. We'll wait until we get the guidance from that. They threw in something here that Chinese-owned entities are ineligible for a second PPP. I don't think that'll really apply to many people that we would have here. The maximum is $2 million on a PPP loan. If you saw before, there was a lot of bad press for companies that got PPP loans in excess of $2 million. So they have capped that at $2 million. This is really important to the bank, but I also think it's important to you as borrowers. There's no enforcement action against the banks. So as with the first PPP, and they clarified this in this legislation, we as banks are not attesting to or verifying or agreeing with the numbers that we're providing. You're providing us the documentation that's part of the requirements. We are collecting that documentation and retaining it in our files, but we are in no way attesting to that. So if you send in your quarterly, payroll tax forms and that sort of thing, your 940s, if you send those into us, we are not verifying that those are correct or that. We're simply collecting that information. So it's basically removing the bank from any liability. But what that means is that you as a borrower are affirming that you qualify for the loan and that the information you're supplying is correct. And all that may be subject to audit. So you should retain all your documentation. I don't know what the retainage requirement would be, but at least several years. But you should retain all that documentation, and you may at some point be audited by the SBA. So just make sure that what you're providing is accurate and that you keep a file of what you're doing. I think the chances of anybody being audited by the SBA are fairly slim, but you should still retain all those records. It talks about some loans permitted for borrowers in bankruptcy. Again, I just don't know a whole lot about that. We'll have to see. I never dealt with that in the first two rounds, but if there was a bankruptcy involved, there may be PPP funds available to you. The next point is under forgiveness. Any loans that are under $150,000, the forgiveness process is going to be streamlined. We're doing that right now, I believe, for $50,000 or less, but they upped it to $150,000. So it's basically it's a one-page form. You're attesting that you spent the money as you should. Again, you should retain all your records for your files, but we're submitting those, and frankly, those are getting turned around fairly quick by the SBA. At our bank, we haven't had any that hasn't come back. Has been questioned or anything. Every one that we've submitted for forgiveness has been forgiven as we expected. So So any loan under $150,000, the forgiveness process is basically a one-page application. At our bank, that's about 80–90% of the loans that we did were under 150,000. We had a couple fairly large ones. I had, I don't know, 10 or so that were more than that. But for the most part, most of them are under that $150,000. So forgiveness will be easier. The PPP borrower can select that covered period between 8 weeks or 24 weeks. If you remember when the first PPP came out, they said you had to spend that money in 8 weeks. And then midway through that, again, building the buses, they're driving it, they changed that to 24 weeks. I would probably recommend everybody take the 24-week period. It gives you a longer period to spend the money. But once you spent that money, if you spend it in 9 or 10 weeks or whatever, you can go ahead and apply for forgiveness. You don't have to wait for that 24-week period to end. The reason why people do that is because there's eligible expenses, payroll, rent, utilities, those sorts of things that can be included in that PPP. But for every one of those expenses, you have to document it. So like if you're going to use utilities, you have to send me the bill. You have to send me proof that you paid that bill and everything else. Payroll is just easier to document. So what most people did is they took the 24-week period and said they spent all their money on payroll and produced payroll reports that showed that they spent all of that or more in that 24-week period. So I would venture to guess that most people would take the 24-week period versus the 8-week period. It just gives you more time. This is an important point for some folks here on this call. There's eligibility for 501c6s, which are what are they? Lobbyist advocacy. So I think Dane Buy Local or Chamber of Commerce's, those sorts of organizations now can qualify for PPP. They were excluded the last time. I don't know if that was oversight or not, but those organizations can now apply for PPP. I haven't gotten to all the details, but it appears there's more expenses that you can count towards the forgiveness. I don't know the specifics on those yet, but more than just rent and utilities. But again, the vast majority of my borrowers just called it all payroll and used payroll as their basis for doing that. Let's see, there's some stuff here about, this is kind of logistics stuff. You can amend loan applications and request an increased amount as a result in the change of the rules. I think there was, it was kind of fluid the first time around. A rule would change, and there was there's clarifying how you can do that. There's some looks like some language in there about relief for farmers who file under Schedule F, which is a farm income loss on their tax return. I'm not an ag lender. We do have ag lenders at the bank, so I would defer to them. But it appears that there might be PPP funds available for farmers. I think there's going to be a new round of EIDL loans that come out, and we'll have to see that. Those are done directly through the SBA, so we're out of the loop on that. But there may be another round of EIDL loan, which is the Emergency Disaster Relief Loan from the SBA. And then finally, this is actually a pretty big point. And if some of you have applied for forgiveness, you may have run into this already. But if you got an EIDL loan and the SBA forgave like that first $10,000 to the EIDL loan, what the SBA had said is you can't double dip. You can't be forgiven $10,000 on the EIDL loan and then get your PPP loan fully forgiven. So what we had done is, let's say you got a $100,000 PPP loan, but your EIDL loan of $10,000 was forgiven. SBA would only forgive $90,000 of your PPP loan, in your bank. We would set up a payment schedule for that $10,000 to be paid back over 2 years. We heard this was coming, so we actually stopped processing forgiveness loans or forgiveness applications on these sorts of loans. And what the SBA or what this legislation has cleared up is that you can now do both. So if you got $10,000 forgiven on an EIDL loan, and you submit for your PPP forgiveness, as long as everything, they're in two separate buckets. Then if your PPP loan, if it all qualifies, that loan can be fully forgiven, and you can get the $10,000 forgiven on the EIDL loan. So we anticipate that those loans that we've already done, where we told people that they have to repay that $10,000, that we're going to get those $10,000 from the SBA or from the government, basically, and those loans will be paid off as well. So you can't kind of double dip. So if you've got an EIDL loan and $10,000 forgiven, you can still get your PPP loan fully forgiven. So that applies to the loans that are already on the books and for this next round of PPP loans. The only other thing I would say is, if you don't have, a lot of you know from before, if you don't already have that relationship with your lender, you should be working on that right now. I don't know what they're going to require for documentation, but my guess is you have to show that reduction in quarterly revenue. So that might be quarterly QuickBook reports. It might be sales reports that you have, point of sale reports that you might have. It might be bank deposits. But I would work on right now figuring out a way that you could verify your sales from one quarter to the next. For most people, I think like with strategic brand marketing, I think we're just going to use our quarterly QuickBooks reports, because I think that'll probably be able to show it. But if you don't use QuickBooks or you don't do a monthly financial statements, I would start thinking about how can I show, the SBA or my bank that I had a 25% reduction in revenue from one quarter to the next. But we'll wait. I anticipate that by the end of this week or so, we'll probably have guidance from the SBA, and my guess is probably early next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or something. We're going to start taking applications. The last go around, if you remember, there was a certain bucket of money that was allocated, and there was a frantic rush from everybody to get their applications in. So, I know me personally, I worked 12, 14-hour days for about 6 or 7 days in a row before that first round of money ran out. Hopefully, I think what the government will do is that if money runs out, they'll just throw some more money at it, because that's what they ultimately did before. So they just don't want this to be a mad rush and, you have people miss out simply because they couldn't get into a queue quick enough. But again, I would start working on how you can show that quarterly reduction. And again, if you don't already have a relationship with that bank, maybe start working on that right now. Like before, I'm going to handle all my existing clients first, and that includes probably all the people who had PPP loans before. And then after that, we'll take on additional clients. I'm not sure, but I know Whibik did some, not, people who were kind of like left out there who didn't have a banking relationship. I know Whibik took some of that on here, but that might be an avenue too if people are looking for a place to process your PPP loan. All right.
Lots of good info, Ted. So I want to kind of take a breather and maybe back up. We have some folks who are sending questions. And I want to just highlight one bullet point that you made that I think is important, and folks may have glossed over it because it may not pertain to them, but it really does. And that is expanded eligibility for 501c6s, which is Dane Buy Local, which is your chambers of commerce, which is your Convention and Visitors Bureau, which are all these folks to, quite frankly, as I understand it across the state, many of these people who help you in your business and help you promote your business have been furloughed, not getting paid. Dues have been not coming in as they should. So this is finally the relief that we need for our small business advocates. So I'm personally excited about that. And you might recall the reason that were not eligible in the first round is because 501c6s are classified as lobbyists. They're in the same category as a lobbyist. So you can see why funds were not previously available. This time they are going to get the relief they need. So as we come out of the pandemic and you continue to look forward into reopening your business or opening it a little bit more full, this is important because the people that we need in place, the Paulas, the Collins, the Jason at DMI, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, they will be able to come slowly back to work as funds are replenished. So Yay, that's exciting. I'm thrilled about that one because we all need these partners as we move forward. So a couple of questions. And again, if you have more, you can message me or put them here in the chat. I just want to roll back up, Ted. And before we get to these, let's talk about the things we can do right now. And I think you hit on the most important one. We know, or we think we know, that there's going to be this 25% decrease that we need to show. So right now, in this week before the SBA gives us their final ruling on this legislation or these loans, that would be one thing, right? Go and make sure, check all four. It's actually 3 quarters, and I think through January of 2020, that 4th quarter, but you show a 25% loss in one of those quarters, right? And we can all be looking for that now.
Right. It's a 25% reduction in the quarterly revenue. So I actually think I was looking at one of my clients the other day, and I think that their year to year, full year revenues aren't really all that different, but one quarter they were down very significantly. So the way I read it right now would be that even though their year was about flat year to year, that quarter was down significantly. That gets them across the threshold for eligibility, and then it becomes a 2.5 times payroll, just like before. So
Right.
so yes, whatever. Think about, one, do you think you had that quarterly loss in revenue, and then 2, how can I verify that, or how can I document that for a lender or the SBA?
And the reason, again, we can be proactive about this. Remember last time, the first round, right? I think we were all just kind of in a fog at the time with the virus, and then all of everything, all these programs came out at the same time. But I think now we have the benefit of a week to get these things together so that by hopefully early next week, we're going to be able to have all this documentation. So when you make your application, you've got it right there. The other thing that we can do, and Heather brings this up and asks a question, Ted, and I know you've already gotten some calls from people that you did not help. They are not clients. You did not help them the last time, but they're looking now they're calling banks. And I know Dane Buy Local has several local banks and a credit union that are Dane Buy Local members. But now's the time to reach out if you don't have that local relationship, because boy, right between the eyes, right? This is so important. So Heather's saying, are there any recommendations for how to prepare for anyone who doesn't have an existing lender relationship? How do they go about doing that? What works best?
Well, a couple of things with that. One is you should verify whether your financial institution is doing PPP loans or not. So some credit unions are not doing it. Credit unions are really not set up to be commercial lending institutions, right? So some credit unions aren't doing it. I believe Summit did, but I believe like UW Credit Union did not. Some banks put limits on how much they were going to do. And some banks decided not to do the program at all. So I know that I'd heard that there's at least 2 banks in Dane County that when this first rolled out said, that's not something, it's not going to be a big deal, we're not going to get involved with it. I would venture to guess that all those banks this go around are certainly going to be part of that. Okay, so you should do that. So one, verify that whether or not your financial is going to do that. If not, I would recommend that you pursue a community bank, whether that's Monona, Park, State Bank Cross Plains, Capital Bank, Bank of Sun Prairie. I think that those community banks are better served to help people than to go to a BMO or a Chase or something like that. The other thing you'll have to do is if you don't have that relationship with that bank right now, you'll be a new borrower to that bank. And so there's certain things that have to be collected to be a borrower. So you might want to gather your filed copy of your articles of incorporation. If you have an operating agreement or corporate bylaws, you'll need a copy of that. You'll need a copy of driver's licenses of the signatories. So you'll have to be set up as a borrower in the system, and you'll have to go through all that customer identification and documentation that you need to be a borrower. So if you don't already have that borrowing relationship with your bank, or you don't have an existing PPP loan, that's what we scrambled with a lot of times, because we only have 10 days from the date of approval to close that loan. So I spent a good part of that 10-day window gathering those sorts of documentations from non-clients. So your corporate docs, if you're going to have those in order, again, your articles, your operating agreement or bylaws, verification of your tax ID number, pictures of driver's licenses for any of the signers, those sorts of things you might want to gather and have ready to go.
Good.
Hey, Peggy, can I jump in just for a sec here? Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Go for
it. Okay. So I just want to reemphasize what Ted just said as far as banks are concerned. I've been doing surveys among the banks who are members of Dane Buy Local. So as Ted mentioned, the Bank of Sun Prairie, Capital Bank, Home Savings Bank, Monona Bank, Park Bank, and Summit Credit Union have all confirmed with me that they are going to process the next round of PPP. Dane County Credit Union and UW Credit Union are not processing PPP, so they cannot help you out there. And Heather from SBDC, are you processing PPP loans or not?
No, we're working on helping clients through the process as we get to know more, but we don't directly work with the loan processing piece.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then the other one that's a little bit up in the air at this point is Whibik. When I reached out to Whibik, they were unclear as far as what was going to happen moving forward. I'm guessing that they'll probably handle their current clients, but I'm also guessing that they're not going to take on new projects at this point. So that's what happened last time with them. But they were a little unsure as far as how things were going to proceed for the next round there. So, and again, I'll reemphasize, a relationship with one of these financial institutions is very, very important. Please do not process through BMO or Wells Fargo or any of the other national ones. I cannot tell you how many horror stories I heard about PPP in these national brands. Every time somebody would call me up and saying they were having trouble with PPP, every single time it was a national brand that they were having trouble with. It was not the local guys. So please, for your own benefit, if you're not there already, get that set up this week. Even though you can't apply, you can still get your relationship going with these banks. Okay, sorry, go ahead, Peggy.
No, thanks for that. And the other thing with Whibik is, even though they certainly have the capability to do them, it's whether or not they'll get the funding for it. So that's the question mark, whether they will or not have the funding. So, okay, a couple of questions. And Colin, if you wouldn't mind typing in the chat who the available lenders are that are Dane Buy Local members. If you could repeat that by putting it in the chat, I think that'd be helpful. And then back to you, Ted. Denny's asking if there's any reason why we can't use QuickBooks P&L to show the decrease, or can we?
Yeah, we're still waiting for what the SBA is going to require us to document, but to me, that seems like a reasonable request. I don't know, there is no easy way to do it. You could have bank statements, but frankly, you could, maybe you don't get to the bank every day or every week or whatever, and you could simply, it depends on the timing of when you actually made deposits. But I think it's probably going to be something like QuickBooks would be my first guess. If you could provide, produce quarterly financial statements, I think that's probably the way they're going to go, but we'll have to see from guidance. But if you do QuickBooks like we do in our business here, yes, I think that quarterly QuickBooks is probably the way that you're going to do it.
Okay. Janice is indicating that she says, I have $1,000 in idle that was not forgiven on my PPP loan. Am I eligible to apply again, or do I need to pay off the $1,000 now to be eligible?
Two things on that. One is that my guess is that they're going to circle back with you on that $1,000 that wasn't forgiven on the PPP originally, and they will now forgive that. We're still waiting from guidance and SBA. I mean, they have all the records, so they know what was forgiven or not forgiven. So I think that you'll ultimately get that paid back. And then the answer to the second question is yes. If you got a PPP loan the first time, regardless of that idle loan and whether it's repaid yet or not, you should be able to qualify and apply for a second PPP loan.
Okay. Regarding the double dip, is that on different expenses for each?
I think that the idle loan had to be used for different things other than payroll, and you had to document that. So, yeah, I think they're two separate buckets. So I think you'll still have to be able to show that you spent the idle loan on, let's say, inventory, equipment, that sort of thing, and then you spent the PPP loan on payroll and rent or something like that. You have to keep those buckets of money separate, but I think that you can still do both. Yes.
Yeah, that's, and again, and we talked about that. So it's like, if you used PPP right for payroll in a certain period of time, you could use it on the idle in a different period of time, correct?
I
Not the
believe so,
double
yes.
dipping on the same payroll total, but it's two different buckets at two different times.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Just want to, and maybe I made that more muddier, but I'm trying to clean it up. Okay, so Colin has listed in the chat banks that are available for PPP. There is a credit union in there, and we always have a joke in our house that credit unions aren't banks, but hey, they are financial institutions. Okay, and then there's a question on Ted, if you, in this, I don't know if this is a fair question to ask you because you're with a specific local bank, but thoughts on national brands, the BMOs, the Wells Fargos, et cetera. If somebody already has a relationship with them, if I'm hearing you correctly, and what Colin is saying too, is try and move it locally because it'll be a nightmare with this PPP. And quite frankly, moving forward, like, you know, there's nothing like a local relationship where you can walk in or call somebody and.
Right. I'll say this. So you got to understand the scale of things that are here. So it's a big task. Frankly, like, you know, Peggy and I were talking here over Christmas break here. It's just like, you know, I'm about to get slammed here. You know, like I said, I worked like 12, 14-hour days for like 10 days in a row the first time that came around. So I anticipate that that's going to be my schedule next week. I am just going to be buried in work, right? But it's a manageable thing that we can do. I have a finite group of customers. I can work with those. I've gotten a lot of referrals from people too, and managed in that first round last time to take care of a lot of those referrals. So it's a big project, but it's certainly one that I can do. Now you take a bank at the scale of like BMO, and I'll use one of my neighbors as an example. They're such a large financial institution, and the way that the way that they make money is that they have to be efficient. So they have, you know, we look at, you know, there's a metric we use in banking, full FTEs per $1 million or something like that of assets, and they are way more efficient, but they run pretty lean. So they just don't have the manpower to take this on. So what those institutions did is went out and bought software packages and said, here's a portal, you go in and enter your stuff in, we'll just tie that right into the SBA system and do that. Well, the SBA didn't like that because they were all of a sudden dumping like tens of thousands of applications simultaneously and literally froze up the system. And then it was blocking out small community banks from being able to get in it. So about halfway through that first round, SBA shut down all of those. And told those banks that they had to enter it manually just like everybody else did. So I had a neighbor, literally, you could see that money was going to run out. And I forget, it was like a Tuesday night or something. And they figured that by Wednesday morning, the money would run out. And I had a neighbor that was struggling to get their application entered in the BMO portal for days and days and days. And like at 11:30, she sent her application over to me. And within 10 minutes, she was approved and done. And by the next morning, the money was out. So, you know, it's a little more manual process the way I do it, but then I get instant gratification. I know right away that your application has been approved. And so, you know, it's a lot of work, but we do that for our clients. And so, again, if you have an existing relationship with one of those, if you've gone through that institution for your prior PPP, you probably want to stick with that. I will say there's two rumors that I have heard. One is that if you have a prior application, I've heard something to the effect of maybe we just kind of redo that loan. We don't have to reapply again. That's just a rumor, but there's something floating around that if you already have an application in the system, I think we just might reload it and go with it. So we're still waiting on that. The other point I would make, and this is a little bit off topic here, if you remember the last time, if people already have an existing SBA loan, whether that's a 504 real estate loan or a 7A or an SBA Express loan, the last go around, the SBA made 6 months worth of payments on those loans for you. The rumor I've heard is that the SBA is going to do that again, but for 3 months. So again, if you've got a 504, a lot of hotels or big real estate deals end up being 504 loans. If you've got a 504 loan, or if you've got a 7A loan or an SBA Express loan, that there may be some payment relief for that for a 3-month period. Again, that's just a rumor I've heard. I got that from a hotelier that I deal with, that he gotten through an industry publication. So, but my guess is that that's probably true, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, and I think on the rumor that you're hearing about simplification, I mean, I wonder if that's, under their bullet point number 9, simplified application for loans under 150,000. So, there's going to be a threshold. If yours was more than that, they may need to have you reapply. Again, we're just assuming, but since that is one of the points, that would kind of lead me to believe that that will be the case for anyone whose PPP was 150,000 or less. So I don't see any other questions. I do, Paula, thanks for your comment. She's saying she has a chamber member who had issues with a national bank and moved to a local bank. And again, I just, for me personally, it's, and I also, I don't know what our word is. We don't say we bank at a credit union, which is an inside joke at our house, but I also have accounts at local credit unions. So it's not all in a bank, but if that's the case, you may even want to switch to those that are doing a PPP if you're at a credit union. But whatever you do, I think the whole message here, as you can probably hear it plainly, is do it this week. Don't wait. As Ted's indicating, these local lenders that we're suggesting you use are going to get slammed and for the next couple of weeks. And the more work you do this week to lay that out and make it easier for the process, I think the better off you're going to be, and you won't be thrashing around to try and find the information. So we will continue to have Ted and others come in as we know what the final details are. Next Monday during this webinar, we've got Senator Melissa Agard, who wants to do some listening sessions with us. I know we've got another guest coming in, and I don't know if we can say who that is, Colin.
You can.
Okay, Joe Parisi from Dane County will be coming in. And then we're going to try and also get any updates we have as we roll through this PPP program and as we learn more. And I suspect that it may not be Monday, but it might be Tuesday or Wednesday. If that's the case, and we kind of toyed with this, whenever we get these final details, we're thinking that we may just go ahead and have an additional update specific to PPP. So again, keep your eyes on the Facebook page if that should happen. I don't see any other questions. I know that's an awful lot to take in. If you do, have questions ahead of time about what your specific bank or lender may need, they may not have all the answers now, but you might want to reach out to them and just get on their radar. I don't know, just a quick email and let them know that, you're interested in doing the PPP loan so that they know. Anything else, Ted, before we let you go?
Nope. Again, I don't see all that much different than the original program. So, just work with your lender, submit the application, and go through the process.
Thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
I'm excited we didn't hear any construction noise during the call.
He has since gone for the day. So.
Oh, good. They were drilling tile. It was fun. Anyway, Colin, anything else?
Yeah, so thank you, Ted. Thank you, Peggy, for bringing that information to us today. We appreciate that. We'll do this on a regular basis, continuing to do the Monday webinars for the time being. Just two other quick points that I'll make here. In the package that was signed however long ago that was, a week or so ago. Another component to all of this is there is another unemployment package that's available. So I know there were some people that opted to do the unemployment boost instead of the PPP or a combination or whatever the case might be. So that's another thing that we'll be keeping an eye on and trying to bring information to you as well as that information becomes more apparent, more clear to us. So keep an eye out for that. The other thing is, and I know I have a handful of board members that are on this call, and you're all thinking that I'm going to say the wrong date, but as of about 20 minutes ago, the date changed. So there's a press conference scheduled for tomorrow at noon. I am hoping to be able to publish a Zoom link so that you're able to listen in on the press conference. You are definitely going to want to hear this information. I have good stuff coming. So that will be tomorrow at noon. Watch Facebook for information on that. If I'm able to get you in on the press conference to listen in, I will. Otherwise, as soon as we can share that information with you following the press conference, we will do so. Look forward to that. So I believe that pretty much wraps us up for today. Thank you everyone for joining us. Join us again next Monday, 10 a.m., same place, different code. We'll see you all next week. Have a great week, everyone. Take care.
Happy New Year, everyone.